Hello, I'm Billy Stewart, Assistant Pastor here at Solid Rock Tabernacle. I would like to take this opportunity to invite you to come join us personally in one of our exciting spirit-filled services. Our Sunday school begins at 9 a.m. Our Sunday morning worship is at 10 a.m. Our Sunday evening worship is at 6 p.m. And we have an exciting Wednesday evening Bible study that begins at 7 p.m. Hey, we'll save a seat for you. And now, let's join our service already in progress.
All right. All right. Well, we ended off last week, 2 weeks ago, I guess. It's been 2 weeks. Because one of them was Thanksgiving, the other one was the Christmas thing. Yeah, so it feels like it's been forever since we've been here. So let's review just a little bit as we began. The new heaven, the new earth, and the new Jerusalem has come down. We have seen that everything is. I got to clear some of this stuff out. There we go. We see that everything is all the bad is washed away, is gone away. The sea is gone. All of this stuff is just gone now. So we have the new heaven, the new earth, the new Jerusalem is there. And we're going to see, that right now we're going to talk a little bit about the new Jerusalem. And we're starting at verse number 6 in chapter 21. And those things came up, so they messed me up again. All right. And he said unto me, It is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. But the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. So, Jesus is saying here, I am the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end, and he's announcing, it is done. It is done. It shows that God's eternal purpose has been completed. He's taken care of it. All that he had that needed to be done has been done. Ephesians 1:10 has been fulfilled. What does Ephesians 1:10 say? I'm so glad you asked. Let me tell you. He says that in the dispensation of the fullness of times he might gather together in one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on earth, even in him. What this is saying is that all things have been resolved or summed up in Jesus. Everything has been taken care of. He says, I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. Now, we see a lot of this talking about thirst and drinking. It's a common picture of God's supply in man's spiritual need. We see it a lot. And drinking, when you drink, it is an action of receiving. Right? When you drink something, you receive something. You get something. Okay? It's an action of receiving. It is action. It's kind of like faith. It's doing something. All right? Now, It's not a merit-based work in itself, right? But it is doing something. What does a thirsty person do? Drinks. Yeah, he drinks. Okay. If you're thirsty, you drink. A Route 44, Sonic, Diet Dr. Pepper with vanilla easy ice. Okay? So you drink. When you're thirsty, you drink. Have you ever been out somewhere working in the sun or something like that, or on the golf course in the middle of summer when it's 110 degrees outside and you're out there playing and you're thirsty and you get that bottle of water or something and you start drinking? Oh man, that just, nothing tastes better than that. Yeah, you know, I mean, just when you get hot and thirsty, drinking is wonderful, okay? And there is no better representation of faith in all the Word than to say, if you're thirsty, to drink. Again, to drink is to receive. It is to receive. Okay? Drinking's, actually, when you think about it, drinking's remarkably easy. Drinking's easier than eating. Okay? You don't have to, yeah, you don't have to chew, you know? You know, unless you're like me, I don't chew anyway. I just bite it off, and I'm like a dog. I bite it off and swallow it whole. Yeah. All right, let's look at something else here in our text that we had earlier. Verse number 7. It said, "He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son." Those who have overcome all of this inherit all things. They have a special relationship with God, those who have overcome. Okay. But those who reject Jesus, when they reject him, they make themselves apostates. Now, these people that reject Jesus, that make themselves apostates, we see these people are specifically prohibited from entering the New Jerusalem. They're not going to be allowed in. Okay? Yeah, they're going to be burning in the lake of fire. That's what verse 8 tells us. It says, "But the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable and the murderers and the whoremongers and the sorcerers." Now, sorcerers here, we've talked about this before. Sorcerers, does anybody remember what the Greek word for sorcerer is? Okay. Pharmakia, which is where we get what? Pharmacy, yeah. Okay, so pharmakia, sorcerers, which is pharmakia, refers to people who are doing drugs, selling drugs, getting rid of drugs, okay? It's not the ones that are doing magic out there, although that is included in it somewhat, but it is the ones that are doing these things that are trying to artificially enhance and make people think that they're seeing something of God. Okay? Because some of these people, I've seen people that are, I watch documentaries about it a lot, and there have been people that have said, oh, I took this drug, and it was like, I saw God. Yeah. I met this guy. Yeah, you might be fortunate enough to work with a few of them. But, they're like, oh, it was a... And some of these people will actually act like some of these drugs are religious experiences, until they get too far along in them. Then they find out it's not really a religious experience after all. Yeah, and more like a near-death experience. Okay? Now, something else that we want to look at is the word fearful. Okay? Now, that word fearful, the Greek word for fearful here is dialos, which means cowardly and fearful. Okay? So they're cowardly and fearful.
So they're actually scared of God.
Yeah. Well, they're just they just don't want to take the chance on God, basically. Okay? Now, John's not speaking of natural timidity here. Okay? Natural timidity is people that, there's some people that are just timid. They don't want to do things. Okay? Just because that, somebody, you come across an armed robbery in progress and you don't step in and do something about it, doesn't make you a coward. Okay? In fact, for most people, it makes you smart if you don't get involved in it. Yeah. Yeah. I only stop one bullet at a time, okay? Okay. Now, the cowardice that John is talking about here, is the cowardice that chooses self over Christ. That you would rather do things for yourself than do things for Christ. Okay. They never step out in faith. And the reason that they never step out in faith is because they're afraid of every new step they take. There's a lot of people that won't step out in faith and won't do things, that won't come to Christ, that won't make the commitment to follow Christ because they're afraid. They're afraid, they're fearful to step out in faith and do what needs to be done. Because in Christianity, we have to have faith. Right? Without faith, we're nothing. We don't have anything. Okay? You have to have faith. And you have to be able to step out in that faith. Stepping out in faith is like stepping out, it is like Peter stepping out of the boat in the storm. That was faith. Okay? But then he let fear get in the way. He started to sink. Okay? And Jesus told him, "You of little faith." That was one of the more common things that Jesus would say to people. "Oh, you of little faith." And he'd say a lot to his own disciples. What's wrong with you? Why don't you have faith?
That's pretty sad because they're the ones walking with him.
Yeah, they're the ones walking with him, talking to him, and everything else. But people won't step out because they are afraid of every new step. I'm afraid where this is going to lead me. I like where I am. Even if I don't really like where I am. Yeah, people don't like change. Some people get the attitude, better the devil you know. Better the problems that you know rather than stepping out and maybe facing other problems that you don't know about. But faith is stepping out and saying, even if I have more problems somewhere, it's okay. I'll overcome them.
I know it. I've had to have faith the last 2 days, me in the bank. Of course, someone had tried fraud on my account.
Mm-hmm.
$4,000.
Was that all?
That's all.
Well, that's pocket change for you, Aunt.
And then the bank stopped it. I had to lose my debit card that I've had forever and memorize the numbers and everything. And then they cleared it off, and here it come again.
Huh.
In the day.
Lots of fun. All right. Let's go to verse 9 and 10. And there came unto me one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials full of the 7 last plagues. Now get this, understand. This is one of the 7 angels. Remember the last plagues that we talked about, the vial judgments, the bowl judgments. Remember that. Here's one of the angels that had these judgments. And he comes and talks to Paul, or to John. And he talked with me saying, come hither, I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great city and high mountain, and shewed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. Okay? Now, anytime, several times in Revelation, John speaks of being carried away in the Spirit. So when John is saying that he's carried away in the Spirit, we tend to think of this as John is actually taken up to heaven to see what's going on, to see what's happening. Because every time he says, I was carried away in the Spirit, we see something pertaining to heaven. All right? Yeah. He's carried up, so he's actually seeing something that is in heaven. And again, this is one of the 7 angels that brought the last 7 plagues to John. And he says he will show John the bride, the Lamb's wife. Okay? Now, passages like this make some commentators say that the New Jerusalem is not a literal place. Because what is the bride, the Lamb of Christ? Yeah, it's the church. They say it's an exotic symbol of the church. Right? But we have to understand something here. This city is a literal place. Yeah. So why is it called the bride, the Lamb's wife, if it is a literal place? And we know that the bride, the Lamb's wife, is the church. Well, it's called the bride, the Lamb's wife, because it's where all of God's people are going to gather. Okay? So New Jerusalem is certainly like the bride. But the association doesn't diminish the reality behind the image. Okay? It's going to be the city associated with the bride. It's going to be awesome to us in the sense of beauty. Okay? We're not going to be able, it's just going to strike us. We're going to be awestruck because of the beauty of it. And we're going to look at the beauty of it. Okay? Verses 11 through 14. Having the glory of God, and her light was like unto a stone most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. And had a wall great and high, and had 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels. And the names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. So there's 3 gates on each side of the city. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Okay. Now what does that tell you? That last verse, what does that last verse tell you? Okay. The apostles of Christ, the disciples of Christ, the apostles of Christ, were the foundation of Christianity. And they are the foundation that the new city is built on, the New Jerusalem is built on. But it's not just for Christianity, because why? All of the 12 tribes of Israel are going to be there as well. Okay? Now, John obviously is impressed by the glory of this city. Okay? And this city shared the glory of God. It was expressed in the radiant light that is shining from her. Okay? Now it says there is a wall great and high. Why does it need a wall? Why does it need a wall? Okay. To keep evil out? No, the wall's not for defense. Why? Because there are no more enemies. All the evil has been cast into the lake of fire, so there are no more enemies. This is after this is after the great white throne judgment, and everybody that's evil has been cast into the lake of fire and thrown into hell. Okay? After the second death. So there are no more enemies. So they don't need the wall for defense. But the wall gives the city definition. Okay? So you can see the city. Right? Now it says there are 12 gates. There's 3 gates on all 4 sides. And the names of the tribes communicate the unity and heritage the people of God will have with Israel. One thing we need to remember is God will never forget Israel. There's too many Christians and too many denominations that say, oh, you know, the Jews are just, they're doomed and all this other stuff. No, they're not. The Jews will never, God will never forget the Jewish people. He will never forget the Israelites because they are His people. They are His chosen people. We have been adopted into Israel. So by adoption, as Christians, by adoption, by marriage, okay? By marriage, we are part of Israel. We are Jews by marriage. Okay? Now, obviously, we don't have to follow the Jewish law and all that stuff. But by marriage, we are Jews. We are Israel. Which is why we need to be praying for Israel. Because, you know, I'm not worried that Israel is going to be defeated and wiped off the face of the earth. It's not going to happen. Okay? That's not going to happen. Okay? God's going to protect Israel. Now, we saw before as we were going through earlier in this, we saw how big Israel was as compared to the United States. Do you remember that? Very, very small. You know, it covers a very small strip, and not even from one border, from the northern border to the southern border of the United States. It's a very small country, and yet it's one of the most powerful countries in that region. Not because of American support, but because it's God's people. You know? And God says that He will bless the people who bless Israel, and He will curse the people who curse Israel. So all these people that are wanting us to do away with our support of Israel and everything like that, they're asking us to be cursed by God. Because if we do that, this country is in bad enough shape right now. If we give up on Israel and we turn our back on Israel, this country doesn't have a chance. Okay? God will never forget. Okay? Now, some people think the gates and all of this that are there, they think the arrangement is like the layout of the tabernacle during the Exodus in Numbers 2. So, in Numbers 2, if you remember the tabernacle in Numbers 2, it had 3 areas on each side, on all four sides. Okay? 3 entry points. That was for all the 12 tribes of Israel. Now the city also has 12 foundations. And on each foundation is written the names of the 12 apostles. Okay? This gives us an eternal testimony to the apostles. An eternal testimony to them. And it shows us their permanent place in God's plan. You can't build anything without a foundation. Ladies, y'all can't even put on makeup without a foundation. So you putting on makeup. What is that? That's foundation. Are you putting on makeup or are you building a house? What are you doing, you know? But I got to have foundation. You can't build anything without a foundation. Without a foundation, it's just going to fall apart. Okay? So you got to have the foundation. And this foundation is built on the apostles, the eternal testimony of the apostles. And it shows a permanent place in God's plan. And it is the right place for God's people because it is built on the foundation of the apostles. Let's go to Revelation 15 to 17. 21, 15 to 17. And he that talked with me, remember that's the angel, okay? He's talking with John here. Still talking about the angel speaking to him. And he that talked with me had a golden reed to measure the city and the gate thereof and the wall thereof. All right? Pay attention to these next couple of verses here. And the city lieth foursquare, and the length is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. So it is a cube. Okay? It's a square cube. The walls are the same. The height is the same. Everything is square. Square cube. And he measured the wall thereof, and 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is of the angel. Okay? Now, as I said, the city is laid out as a square. It's not laid out in oblong and in circles or rectangles or anything else. It's a square. And it's a perfect square. And the length, the width, and the height are all equal. Right? So this makes it a cube. Huh? Yeah, three-dimensional. Okay? This is kind of reminiscent of the holy place of the tabernacle. The holy place of the tabernacle. What's the holy place of the tabernacle? The Holy of Holies? It's where the Ark of the Covenant is. Okay? It's the place where God dwells, in the tabernacle. That is what it is. That's what it's said to be, because the Ark of the Covenant had the 2 cherubim that were on the top of it, which was what? The mercy seat of God. Okay? And only the high priest could go into the Holy of Holies. Now, this is reminiscent of the Holy of Holies, the holy place of the tabernacle, but everybody's going to be allowed in it. Okay? This suggests that the entire city is a holy place. Now, the angel holds a golden reed to measure. New Jerusalem is enormous. All right? Now, let's look how enormous that is, that it's going to be. When I say New Jerusalem, the size is going to be big, what do you think? What do you think of? How big do you picture in your mind? 12,000 furlongs. Okay. Real quick, what do you think of the city being a large city, enormous city? Size of New York City, maybe?
Yeah, that's what I said, size of Alma to New York City.
Okay, size of Alma to New York City. Okay, all right. Well, let's look at it. It measures 12,000 furlongs. Now, the word furlong is the word furlong in Greek is stadion, and it is 1/8 of a Roman mile. Okay. Now, we're going to do some math here. Y'all get ready for this. All right. I've already done all the math, so you don't have to worry about it, but you can check it if you want to. All right. A Roman mile is 4,854 feet. That's how long a Roman mile is. So a stadion or a furlong is 606.75 feet. So that makes the city 7,281,000 feet cubed. Okay. Now, what does that break down to? That breaks down to about 1,379 miles cubed. It's 1,379 miles this way, this way, this way, and this way. That's a big city. Okay? That means at its base, just at its base, it's inside of it, the square footage inside of that is 53 trillion 12 billion 961 million square feet, or 1,901,641 square miles. That's big. And it is as tall as it is wide. So that means the whole city, walls and everything included, get this, that's the number for it. That is 3.85 to the 20th power cubic feet. That's big, okay? Yeah, that's a lot. That's almost the size of the national debt. Okay? That equates to about 2,622,362,939 cubic miles. Is how big the city is. Now, let's give a little bit of a comparison to this. The United States is about 3,800,000 square miles. That's how big the United States is. So the city of New Jerusalem is going to be about half the size of the United States. Now let's look at this. Here's the United States. All right? Now this is not the scale, but it's pretty close. This is the United States. That's how big the New Jerusalem was going to be. And it's still going to go 1,300 miles high. Okay? That's higher, that's farther away than satellites in synchronous orbit around the Earth. Okay? That's a big city. Okay? So that square is going to be about what the New Jerusalem is going to encompass. All right? Now it says, according to the measure of a man, that is of the angel. What does that mean? Basically what he's saying here is that the angel's measurements are the same as man's measurements. So it's not some heavenly measurement that we're talking about here. This is going to be a huge, huge, huge place. All right? Imagine, can you imagine that? How big that city, I mean, that's just a city is all it's going to be. Now, there are some people there's one commentator that I read that said, throughout history, all the way around, from the beginning of time to the end of time, He says it's estimated that there's going to be about 100 billion people that have been on the earth. Okay? There's 8 billion on the earth right now. So 100 billion, that's a lot of people. He says if you calculate it to even 20 to 25% of those people get saved and follow Christ, he said within the city of the New Jerusalem, every one of those throughout history that have been saved will be able to have 75 acres of their own. I like that. I'm putting my mansion right in the middle. I don't want any neighbors. Because my sister says she's getting me a coffee cup for Christmas. It's got a cat on the front of it. Of course, got a cat in the front of it. But it says, I hate people. After coffee, I feel better about hating people. I don't hate people, but anyway. All right. Let's look at Revelation 18 to 21. And the building of the wall of it was as jasper, and the city was pure gold, like unto clear glass. And the foundation of the wall of the city were garnished with all manner of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third chalcedony, the fourth an emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sardis, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, and the 10th chrysoprasus, and the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. And the 12 gates were pearls. Every several gate was one pearl. And the city of this city was pure gold, and it was transparent glass. Now, we need to take these, and we should take these as literal representations. That's truly what they were made of. Okay? But they express the realities of another world. Not our world, of another world. Okay? And we're only getting a brief glance of what John saw. And remember, John's trying to describe it, just like all through Revelation. John is trying to describe something in his terms that we can understand now. All right? We're only getting a brief glance of it. We cannot even begin to see its fullness. We can't even begin to imagine what it's going to be like. We can't even begin to think what John saw. Dream what John saw. It was so great. We can't see its fullness until we actually see it ourselves. John's description of this brings out great value of what God has for his people. Now, all the precious stones that they have in there. Okay? The jasper is said to be clear, but if you look up what jasper, the jasper stone is not clear. Okay? What we know as jasper now is not clear. So we know the precise identification of these gemstones in modern terms is difficult to put a finger on exactly what they are. Okay? But the impression of it is that it is unending and staggering beauty. It's going to be beautiful. Okay? Now, this symbolism that we're seeing here, when you see this, we get the impression of something that's worth a lot. But he's not trying, John is not, and the angel is not trying to show us an impression of wealth and luxury. Right? That's not what he's trying to point out here. Wealth and luxury, that's not going to matter. Okay? What he's trying to point out is the glory and holiness of God. Now, the closest biblical reference that we can come to any of this is probably the high priest's breastplate. Right? Because the high priest, his breastplate, in Exodus 28, 15 to 21, he had 12 stones, each one representing one of the different tribes of Israel. And they were all precious stones. Okay? Now, one thing that, have you noticed something very interesting about everything he's describing on this, that John's describing on this? He says everything is transparent. Okay? And his constant mention of transparency indicates that the city is designed to transmit the glory of God. Okay? Now, there are two main principles that we need to keep in mind. Okay. The first one is that we have to understand the ideas communicated in the details, the glory, the beauty, the splendor, and so forth. Okay? So, John is giving us in-depth details on this, but he's trying to give us an idea of the greatness and the glory of it. Okay? And he's trying to show us the second thing that we have to keep in mind, second principle we need to keep in mind, that the only way this can have that kind of glory is that the architect and maker has to be God. We can't do it. It has to be God. Okay. All right, let's look at verses 22 and 23. It says, "And I saw no temple therein." Remember that. There's no temple in this city. "For the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it. And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon, to shine in it. For the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof." No sun, no moon, no day, no night. It's constantly lit by the glory of God. Okay? Now, when that don't give you doodads and move underneath the air conditioner or something, because now the one thing when we think about today's time, and even in the ancient cities, it was unthinkable to have a great city with no temple in it. Every city had a temple. Maybe it wasn't to God, but it was a temple to their gods. Every city had a temple in it. That would be kind of like equating a modern city and say we have a great city. Let's say that's like saying New York City without a single bank in it. Okay? We can't even comprehend that, okay? Yeah. That would be like saying having Los Angeles with no shopping centers. Okay? Nevertheless, this city has no temple in it. None. Now, understand this, he said as he paused for effect to take a drink. Understand this. The temple has not been removed, it has been expanded. Okay? Remember, the temple is what? Well, the temple in those times, the temple was what? It was built for what? To be the place where God dwelt, right? Here, every place in the holy city is where God dwells. So we don't need a temple because God's everywhere. Eh? Yeah, it's a country, and it's okay. Now, before Jesus came along, the temple was a prophecy. Okay, you had Solomon's temple, you had all the temples, but these were prophecies. They'd been prophesied that these temples would be built. Okay. In Christianity, we say what? That we are His temple. We are God's temple. Okay? In Christianity. This is where God dwells. In the millennium, the temple is going to be a memorial. Why? Because the temple will be there, but it's just going to be, God's radiance is going to shine out of the temple, as we saw. Okay? But here, the temple is everywhere. The whole thing is temple. Now, in modern times, when we think of worship, we think of going to a church. Okay? We think we need a place to go worship. A church, a tabernacle, synagogue, something like that. We need a place to go worship. A place to assemble. A place for who to assemble? Brought up a good point. A place for who to assemble? God's people to assemble. Okay? Yeah. This is a place for God's people to assemble. At this time, after all of this is over, people don't need a place to worship. Why don't we need a place to worship during that time? Yeah, because we're in that four wall, and the object of worship is always there. So we don't need to go someplace to find the object of our worship, because the object of our worship is right there all the time. I said there was no need of the sun, neither of the moon. Think of this. Heaven will be a place of pure worship. Not the worship that we tend to have now. Yeah. Yeah, don't have to have those. You've got the glory of God, the sun. There's no need for the sun. There's no need for the moon. There's no need for any of this stuff. Yeah. Yeah. No rain, no lightning bolt, no green energy, everything's going to be perfect. Right? It will be pure worship there. The things we use to help us worship, but we have that we have to help us worship, different things, buildings, music systems, customs, all of this. Okay? Oftentimes, those things that we use to help us worship now end up distracting us in worship a lot of times. Okay? Especially when you get these laser light shows and pyrotechnics and everything at a church service. Okay, they're distracting. That's distracting from worship. Okay, but in this, that's no longer an issue. In fact, we can have a form of pure worship now, if we have the faith that we can do it. We can decide to trust God so completely that your joy and what you consider beauty, your foundation of knowledge, are all based on Jesus and not on anything else. And here in the new city, our focus is going to be totally on the person we worship. None of these other things. Okay? Only on the Creator. It says the Lamb is the light. The light speaks of joy. The light speaks of beauty. Without light, there is no beauty. The light speaks of knowledge. And in heaven, we will all know Him as He knows us. Ooh, think about that for just a second. We're going to know God like God knows us. How does God know us? Man, He knows us better than we know us. And we're going to know God the way that He knows us. Okay? All right, finishing up here. And the nations of them which are saved shall walk in the light of it, and the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honor into it. And the gates of it shall not be shut at all by day, for there shall be no night there. And they shall bring the glory and honor of the nations into it. And there shall be no wise enter into it anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination, or maketh a lie, but they which are written in the Lamb's book of life. Now here's something very interesting. It says, the kings of the earth. Who are the kings of the earth? Here. It is, and it's difficult to actually understand who the kings of the earth here. Okay? And as we said before, you can find as many different interpretations of Revelation as there are commentators. Okay? Now, some commentators have different suggestions as to what these kings actually are. Some of them suggest that not all the nations were destroyed. Right? But we know that's not true. Some suggest that there will be renewed nations that these kings will be over. Okay? That's a possibility. Okay? But they're all going to be, these are not going to be nations that are going to be contrary to God. They're going to be nations for God. All right? That's maybe. We don't know for sure who these kings of the earth are. But no wise will anything enter into it that defileth. Does that mean that there are going to be people who will threaten the city? Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, not entering in, the people not going to be threatening the city. That's not the idea here. Why? Because, as we said, sin and death have been cast into the lake of fire. It's no longer there. Okay? And since sin and death has been cast into the lake of fire, this exhortation warns the present day readers that the only way to participate, and the people who want to participate in this city, has to turn your loyalties to the Lamb now. Not in the future. Not when all of this is going on. Have to turn your loyalties to the Lamb now. Okay? All right. That brings us to chapter 22. And we'll get into chapter 22 beginning next week. And we're going to be talking about the interior of the New Jerusalem. We've seen the exterior now. Now we're going to see the interior of the New Jerusalem. All right? So it's going to be interesting. We're coming close to the end of this. 22 is the last chapter, so we're coming close to the end of it now. So we'll have to be thinking of something else that we can do after this. It's been a long journey, I know. Well, yeah. We can start at Genesis and keep going, and that'll take us to the rapture, because Revelation has taken us almost a year to go through now. This is 33. This is lesson 33. So, yeah, grandkids can finish on that one. All right. Okay. Anything else? Any questions, comments, concerns? Amens, oh me's. Remember Harold Lee? Let's.